The gunshot echoed through the saloon just as Clara Sutherland realized she had exactly 3 coins left to her name, and not one of them would buy her passage out of Del Rio, Texas, where every soul seemed determined to remind her that a woman alone was either a fool or something worse. She pressed herself against the wooden wall outside the Silver Star, heart hammering as men poured onto the dusty street to investigate the commotion. The November air in 1883 carried a chill that bit through her threadbare dress, and Clara pulled her shawl tighter, trying to disappear into the shadows. She had arrived in this border town 3 days ago on the back of a freight wagon, following a promise of work that turned out to be as empty as her pockets. The woman who had hired her by letter, a supposed seamstress named Mrs. Downey, did not exist at the address given. Clara had knocked on that door until her knuckles bled, but only found an abandoned storefront with broken windows and the laughter of children mocking her desperation from across the street. Now she stood in the growing darkness, watching cowboys and gamblers spill from the saloon, and wondered how much longer she could survive on the charity of the Mexican family who had given her tortillas that morning. Her stomach growled despite the fear coating her throat. She needed work, needed shelter, needed something more than the pitying glances and wandering hands that seemed to be all this town offered a woman with no connections and no prospects. "You look like you are waiting for someone," a voice said, and Clara spun to find a tall man standing a few feet away, his hat tilted back to reveal a face that was younger than she expected, maybe 25 or 26, with eyes that caught the lamplight from the saloon windows. He held his hands away from his sides in a gesture that seemed meant to show he carried no threat, though she could see the revolver at his hip plain enough. "I am not," Clara said, straightening her spine and lifting her chin despite the trembling in her legs. "I am simply taking the evening air." The man's mouth quirked, but it was not quite the mocking expression she had come to expect from the men in this town. The evening air near a saloon where someone just put a bullet in the ceiling tends to be fairly dangerous for taking. "Then perhaps you should move along," Clara said, though even as the words left her mouth she knew how foolish they sounded. She had no authority here, no power to command anyone to do anything. She was a ghost in this town, invisible except when men wanted to see her as something to use. But the man did not move along. Instead, he settled his weight onto one hip, studying her with an expression that seemed more curious than predatory. "I am Xander Jameson," he said. "I work the cattle ranch about 5 miles north of here. Been coming to Del Rio for supplies for near about 3 years now, and I have never seen you before." "That is because I arrived recently," Clara said, not offering her name. She had learned quickly that names could be weapons in the wrong hands, markers that men could use to track you or claim familiarity that did not exist. "From where?" Xander asked, and there was something in his tone that made it sound less like an interrogation and more like genuine interest, though Clara could not imagine why a cowboy would care about the origins of a destitute woman outside a saloon. She hesitated, then decided the truth could not hurt her any more than her current circumstances already did. "Louisiana, New Orleans originally, but I have been moving west for the past 2 years." "That is a fair distance," Xander said. He glanced toward the saloon, where the noise had settled back into the usual din of drinking and gambling. "You have family here in Del Rio?" "No," Clara admitted, the word tasting bitter. She had no family anywhere, not after the fever took her mother and the debt collectors took everything else. Her father had died when she was 16, and her older brother had gone to sea and never returned. At 22, Clara had nothing left but her determination to survive and a foolish hope that somewhere in the vast expanse of the West, She might find a place to belong. Xander was quiet for a moment, and in that silence Clara heard the sound of music starting up in the saloon, a piano player working through a melody that was only slightly out of tune. "You need work," he said finally, and it was not a question. Clara's pride bristled at the assumption, even though it was entirely accurate. "What makes you think that?" "Because I know what hungry looks like," Xander said, his voice gentler than before. "And I know what it looks like when someone is trying to decide if they are desperate enough to walk into a place like the Silver Star and see what kind of employment they might find there." Heat flooded Clara's cheeks, shame and anger mixing in equal measure. "I would never—" "I am not saying you would," Xander interrupted, holding up one hand. "I am saying I have seen that look before, and I know it means you are running out of options. So I am asking straight and honest, do you need work?" Clara wanted to lie, wanted to tell this cowboy with his kind eyes and his too perceptive observations that she was perfectly fine, that she had plans and prospects, and needed nothing from anyone. But the 3 coins in her pocket seemed to grow heavier with each passing second, and she knew that pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "Yes," she said, the word barely more than a whisper. "I need work very badly." Xander nodded, as if this confirmed something he had already known. "Can you cook?" "Yes," Clara said, her mind racing. "I can cook, clean, sew, tend a garden, manage household accounts. I worked for a family in New Orleans for 4 years before they—" She stopped, not wanting to explain how that position had ended when the husband's wandering hands had wandered once too often, and she had been forced to leave rather than endure his attentions. "The ranch where I work has a main house," Xander said. "The owner, Mr. Patterson, is getting on in years. His wife passed 2 years back, and since then the place has been falling apart in terms of meals and upkeep. He has been talking about hiring someone to help, but he is a stubborn old cuss who does not like admitting he needs assistance." Hope flickered in Clara's chest, fragile and tentative. "You think he might hire me?" "I think if you show up tomorrow morning and offer to make him breakfast, he will likely be too pleased with the prospect of a decent meal to turn you away," Xander said. "After that, it will be up to you to prove you are worth keeping around, but I should warn you, it is not an easy life. The ranch is isolated, and Mr. Patterson can be difficult when his joints are paining him. The pay will not be much, maybe $10 a month plus room and board." $10 a month. It was not a fortune, but it was more than Clara had now, and the promise of regular meals and a roof over her head seemed like riches beyond measure. "I would be grateful for the opportunity," she said, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. Xander studied her for another long moment, and Clara had the uncomfortable sensation of being weighed and measured, of having this stranger see through all her carefully constructed walls to the frightened, exhausted woman beneath. Then he nodded, apparently satisfied with whatever he saw. "The ranch is called the Double J. Head north on the main road out of town, and you will see the entrance about 5 miles up. There is a sign, though it is pretty weathered. Can you ride?" Clara shook her head. "I have never been on a horse." "Then you will be walking," Xander said. "You should probably start just after dawn so you arrive at a reasonable hour. Wear sturdy shoes if you have them. The road can be rough." "I will be there," Clara promised, though she had no idea how she would manage the 5-mile walk in the only pair of shoes she owned, which were already worn through at the heels. Xander touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that seemed oddly formal given the circumstances. "I will let Mr. Patterson know to expect a visitor. What should I tell him your name is?" Clara hesitated only briefly this time. If this man was offering her a lifeline, the least she could do was trust him with her name. "Clara Sutherland." "Miss Sutherland," Xander said, and the way he said it, with respect and without any of the innuendo she had come to dread, made something tight in Clara's chest ease just slightly. "I hope to see you tomorrow morning. And Miss Sutherland," he paused, waiting until she met his eyes, "do not give up. You are stronger than you know." Then he was gone, disappearing into the flow of people on the street, and Clara was left alone with the echo of his words and a spark of something that might have been hope. She spent that night huddled in the corner of an abandoned stable, too afraid to spend even one of her precious coins on a room at the boarding house. Sleep came in fits and starts, broken by the sounds of the town and her own anxious thoughts. What if Xander Jameson had been playing some cruel joke? What if she walked all the way to this ranch only to be turned away? What if there was no Mr. Patterson, no position, no hope at all? But when dawn broke across the Texas sky, painting the eastern horizon in shades of gold and pink, Clara brushed the hay from her dress, used water from a public pump to wash her face and hands, and started walking north on the main road out of Del Rio. Her shoes pinched with every step, and the morning air was cold enough to make her shiver, but she kept moving, counting the miles by the fence posts that lined the road. The sun was well up by the time she saw the sign for the Double J Ranch, a wooden marker that hung askew from a post that had seen better days. Clara turned onto the narrow track that led away from the main road, and after another 10 minutes of walking, she crested a small rise and saw the ranch spread out below her. It was larger than she had expected, with a main house built of wood and stone, a huge barn, several smaller outbuildings, and corrals that held horses and cattle in separate enclosures. The land stretched in all directions, brown grass and scattered mesquite trees under a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. Clara could see figures moving among the buildings, ranch hands going about their morning work, and for a moment her courage faltered. This was a real working ranch, a serious operation, and she was just a desperate woman with nothing to offer but empty promises and a willingness to work. But she had walked 5 miles and there was nowhere else to go, so Clara squared her shoulders and continued down the track toward the main house. She was halfway across the yard when a man emerged from the barn, and she recognized Xander Jameson immediately despite the distance. He raised one hand in greeting, then changed direction to intercept her. "Miss Sutherland," he said when he was close enough to speak without shouting. "You made it. How are your feet?" "Perfectly fine," Clara lied, though in truth they were blistered and bleeding inside her ruined shoes. "Where might I find Mr. Patterson?" "Probably in the house, complaining about the coffee I made this morning," Xander said. His expression was warm, and Clara noticed details she had missed in the darkness the night before, the way his dark hair curled slightly over his collar, the breadth of his shoulders, the calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work. "Come on, I will introduce you." He led her to the house, and Clara tried not to limp as she followed him up the steps to the wide front porch. The door was unlocked, and Xander pushed it open without knocking, calling out, "Mr. Patterson, the lady I mentioned is here." The inside of the house was dim after the bright sunlight, and it took Clara's eyes a moment to adjust. When they did, she found herself in a large main room that served as both kitchen and living area, with doorways leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. The space was clean enough, but there was a definite air of neglect about it, dust gathering in corners, dishes piled in the wash basin, a general sense of a place that was maintained but not cared for. An older man sat at a rough wooden table near the fireplace, and he looked up as they entered. He was perhaps 65 or 70, with white hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades under the Texas sun. His eyes were sharp, though, and they fixed on Clara with an intensity that made her want to squirm. "So you are the girl looking for work," he said, his voice gruff. "Xander says you can cook." "Yes, sir," Clara said, moving forward and trying to project confidence she did not entirely feel. "I can cook, and I can manage a household. I worked for a prominent family in New Orleans for 4 years. And why did you leave that position?" Mr. Patterson asked, leaning back in his chair. Clara had prepared for this question during her long walk. "The family relocated to New York, and I had no desire to move to such a large city. I prefer the openness of the country." It was not entirely a lie. The family had talked about relocating, though they had not actually done so before Clara left. But it was close enough to the truth that she could say it without flinching. And apparently it satisfied Mr. Patterson, because he grunted and waved one hand toward the kitchen area. "There is bacon and eggs in the cold box, flour in the bin, and coffee that needs making," he said. "Let us see what you can do." Clara glanced at Xander, who gave her an encouraging nod, then moved toward the kitchen. She found an apron hanging on a peg, tied it around her waist despite the fact that it was far too large, and set to work. The stove was already warm from whatever Xander had done that morning, and Clara added more wood before finding the supplies Mr. Patterson had mentioned. The bacon was good quality, the eggs fresh, and she located a mixing bowl and set about making biscuits to go with the meal. She worked quietly, aware that both men were watching her, though Xander pretended to be occupied with something near the fireplace. Her hands remembered the familiar motions, and despite everything, there was something soothing about the act of cooking, of creating something good and nourishing from simple ingredients. The bacon sizzled in the pan, filling the air with its rich scent, and she whisked eggs with a bit of milk and salt before scrambling them in another skillet. The biscuits went into the oven, and she set a pot of coffee to brew, remembering at the last moment to double the grounds because ranch men always liked their coffee strong. 20 minutes later, she set plates of food in front of both Mr. Patterson and Xander, along with mugs of steaming coffee and biscuits with fresh butter she had found in the cold box. Then she stood back, clasping her hands in front of her, waiting for judgment. Mr. Patterson picked up his fork, tried the eggs, then the bacon, then broke open a biscuit and watched steam rise from the fluffy interior. He chewed slowly, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Xander was eating with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm, but Clara barely noticed, all her attention fixed on the older man. Finally, Mr. Patterson set down his fork and looked at her. "You can cook," he said simply. "The question is whether you are willing to work hard for not much pay and little company out here." "I am willing," Clara said immediately. "I need this position, Mr. Patterson, and I promise you will not regret giving me a chance." "Room and board, plus $10 a month," Mr. Patterson said. "You will have your own room in the house, and you will be responsible for all cooking, cleaning, laundry, and general household management. The work starts before dawn and often does not end until well after dark. The men will treat you with respect or they will answer to me. You accept these terms?" Relief flooded through Clara so intensely she felt dizzy. "Yes, sir, I accept. Thank you, Mr. Patterson. You will not regret this." "We shall see," Mr. Patterson said, but there was something that might have been approval in his eyes. "You can move your things into the back bedroom today. Xander will show you where." It was only after the words were spoken that Clara realized the problem. She had no things to move, nothing but the dress on her back, the worn shawl around her shoulders, and 3 coins in her pocket. Heat crept up her neck as she tried to figure out how to admit this without looking like a complete charity case, but before she could speak, Xander stood up. "I will show Miss Sutherland to her room," he said easily. And I believe there are some linens and such in the storage room that Mrs. Patterson left behind. I am sure she would want them to be used." The reference to the late Mrs. Patterson was clearly intentional, a way to offer Clara necessities without making it seem like charity, and she shot Xander a grateful look as she followed him through one of the doorways. The bedroom was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small chest of drawers, and a window that looked out toward the southern pastures. After the stable and the street corners where she had been sleeping, it looked like paradise. "Thank you," Clara said quietly once they were alone in the room. "For last night and for this, I do not know how to repay you." "You do not need to repay me," Xander said. He crossed to the chest of drawers and opened the top one, revealing folded linens. "Mr. Patterson needed help and you needed work. That is all." "It is more than that, and you know it," Clara insisted. "You did not have to speak to a stranger on the street. You did not have to offer assistance. Most people would have walked right past me." Xander turned to face her, and in the morning light streaming through the window, his eyes were a startling shade of hazel, green and gold and brown all mixed together. "Maybe I did not like the idea of walking past," he said. "And maybe I thought someone who had the courage to come all the way from Louisiana deserved a better chance than what Del Rio was offering." There was something in his voice that made Clara's breath catch, a warmth that seemed to reach right through her defenses and touch something she had been keeping carefully guarded. She found herself staring at him, really looking at him for the first time, seeing not just a cowboy who had helped her but a man who seemed genuinely kind, who worked hard with his hands and apparently spent his evenings in town checking on strangers instead of drinking himself into oblivion. "I should get back to work," Xander said after a moment, breaking the spell. "But if you need anything, just ask. Most of the hands are good men, but if anyone gives you trouble, you tell me or Mr. Patterson immediately. Understood?" "Understood," Clara agreed, though she could not imagine what kind of trouble the ranch hands might cause. She was so grateful to have a position and a roof over her head that she would have dealt with almost anything without complaint. Xander left, and Clara spent the rest of the morning settling into her new role. She unpacked the linens from the dresser, made up the bed, and then returned to the main room to clean up from breakfast and start planning the midday meal. Mr. Patterson had disappeared somewhere outside, leaving her alone in the house, and she took the opportunity to do a thorough inventory of the kitchen supplies and make a list of things that would need to be purchased on the next trip to town. The midday meal was a hurried affair, with ranch hands filing through the house to grab plates of beef stew and cornbread before returning to their work. Clara counted 8 men in addition to Xander and Mr. Patterson, and they were uniformly polite, removing their hats and thanking her for the food before heading back outside. Xander came through last, and he paused long enough to tell her that the stew was excellent before disappearing in the direction of the barn. The afternoon passed in a blur of work. Clara scrubbed floors, washed windows, beat dust from rugs, and generally tried to bring some order to the neglected house. By the time the sun started sinking toward the western horizon, she was exhausted, her blistered feet screaming in protest and her arms aching from unaccustomed labor. But there was also a deep satisfaction in seeing the results of her efforts, in knowing that she had earned her place here through honest work. Supper was another large meal: roasted chicken with potatoes and gravy, biscuits, and an apple pie that she managed to assemble from supplies she found in the cold box and pantry. The ranch hands ate with obvious appreciation, and even Mr. Patterson offered a grudging compliment on the quality of the pie. Xander, who again came through last, lingered a bit longer than the others, helping Clara clear plates from the table. You do not have to do that, Clara protested, reaching for the dishes in his hands. This is my job. And it has been a long day, Xander countered, not relinquishing the plates. Where do you want these? Clara gave in and pointed to the wash basin. They worked in silence for a few minutes, Clara washing and Xander drying, and it felt surprisingly comfortable, this quiet cooperation. Finally, Xander spoke. You did well today. Mr. Patterson was impressed, though he would never say so directly. I am just glad he gave me the chance, Clara said. She scrubbed at a stubborn bit of burned food on a pot, trying not to think about how close she had come to disaster. I was out of options. What brought you west? Xander asked, if you do not mind me asking. Clara considered deflecting the question, maintaining the privacy she had guarded so carefully for the past 2 years. But there was something about Xander that invited confidence, a steadiness that made her want to trust him. I had nothing left in Louisiana, she said finally. My family was gone, my position was untenable, and I thought maybe out here I could start fresh. Find a place where my past did not matter. Does it? Xander asked. Your past, I mean. I suppose that depends on what you want to know about it, Clara said carefully. Xander set down the dish he had been drying and turned to face her fully. I want to know if you are running from something dangerous, if there is someone who might come looking for you, someone you are afraid of. The directness of the question caught Clara off guard, but she appreciated it more than she would have expected. No, she said honestly. There is no one looking for me. I am not running from danger, just from poverty and from men who thought my circumstances gave them the right to take liberties. But there is no angry husband or spurned lover or vengeful employer tracking me across the country, if that is what you are asking. It was, Xander admitted. Not because I doubt you, but because I wanted to make sure you are safe here. Mr. Patterson runs a good operation, and we do not tolerate anyone who would threaten that, including anyone who might show up looking to cause trouble for one of the household. I appreciate that, Clara said softly. But truly, I am just a woman who needed work and a safe place to sleep. Nothing more dramatic than that. I do not think there is anything just about you, Miss Sutherland, Xander said, and there was something in his voice that made Clara look up sharply from the dishes. He was watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something warm and considering. I think you are exactly as brave as you need to be, and that is a rare quality. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks and quickly returned her attention to the washing, not trusting herself to respond. No one had called her brave before. Desperate, perhaps. Foolish, certainly. But not brave. The word settled into her chest like a warm coal, chasing away some of the cold fear that had been her constant companion for so long. They finished the dishes in silence, and then Xander bid her good night and headed to wherever the ranch hands slept. Clara banked the fire in the stove, did a final check of the kitchen, and retreated to her small bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed, hardly believing that this morning she had been sleeping in a stable, and now she had a real room, a real position, and the promise of wages. It seemed too good to be true, and she found herself waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong and snatch away this fragile security. But nothing went wrong. The days fell into a rhythm, early mornings and late nights filled with cooking and cleaning, with the satisfaction of seeing the house transform under her care. Mr. Patterson remained gruff but fair, occasionally offering a word of praise when a meal particularly pleased him. The ranch hands treated her with unfailing courtesy, though Clara was careful to maintain a professional distance. And Xander became a constant, reassuring presence, helping with heavy lifting when she needed it, bringing in firewood without being asked, engaging her in conversation during the quiet moments between meals. It was during one of these conversations, about 3 weeks after Clara's arrival, that she began to realize her feelings toward Xander were shifting into dangerous territory. They were sitting on the back porch in the late afternoon, Clara taking a brief break from preparing supper while Xander mended a broken bridle. The sun was warm despite the December air, and the comfortable silence between them felt more intimate than conversation. "What made you become a cowboy?" Clara asked, watching his capable hands work the leather. Xander smiled slightly. "I am not sure I became a cowboy so much as I fell into it. My father worked ranches all over Texas, so I grew up in this life. When he died 5 years ago, I decided to stay on at the Double J. Mr. Patterson is a good man to work for, and I like the land here." "Do you have other family?" Clara asked. "A sister in San Antonio," Xander said. "She married a banker and thinks I am wasting my life out here in the dust. We write occasionally, but we are not close." He glanced up at her. "What about you? Is there really no one left in Louisiana?" "No one," Clara confirmed. "I am truly alone in the world." She had meant it to sound matter-of-fact, but something in her voice must have betrayed her, because Xander set down the bridle and moved to sit beside her on the porch step. "I do not think you are alone," he said quietly. "Not anymore." Clara's heart began to beat faster, and she found herself very aware of how close Xander was sitting, how she could see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. "I have a position here," she said carefully. "But that is not the same as having people." "Maybe not," Xander agreed, "but maybe it could be the start of having people, if you wanted that." There was a question buried in his words, something tentative and hopeful, and Clara felt her breath catch. She wanted to lean toward him, wanted to close the small distance between them and see what might happen. But fear held her back, the fear of losing this position, of making a mistake that would cost her everything she had just gained. "I should get back to supper," she said, standing abruptly. "Mr. Patterson will be expecting his meal on time." She fled into the house before Xander could respond, her heart pounding and her thoughts in chaos. What was she doing? She could not develop feelings for the cowboy who had saved her from destitution. She had nothing to offer a man like Xander Jameson. No dowry, no connections, no prospects beyond her position as a housekeeper. She was exactly what she appeared to be, a woman with nothing. But over the following days, despite her best efforts to maintain distance, Clara found her eyes seeking out Xander whenever he was nearby. She noticed things she had not let herself notice before. The way he was always kind to the horses, how he took time to teach the younger ranch hands, the quiet competence with which he approached every task. And she noticed, too, the way he looked at her, with a warmth that made her feel seen in a way she never had before. It came to a head on a cold evening in late December, just a few days before Christmas. Clara had been at the ranch for almost 6 weeks, and Mr. Patterson had just paid her the first month's wages, $10 silver that felt like a fortune in her hand. She was sitting in the kitchen after supper, counting them over and over when Xander came in through the back door. "Still up?" he asked, stamping his boots free of dust. "Just admiring my wealth," Clara said with a smile, gesturing to the coins on the table. "I have never been so rich." Xander crossed to the table and looked down at the money, but his expression was sad rather than happy. "Clara," he said, using her first name for the first time, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you say anything." Dread pooled in Clara's stomach. This was it, the moment when everything fell apart, when she learned that the position was temporary, or that Mr. Patterson was selling the ranch, or that something, anything, was about to take away her security. "What is it?" she managed to ask. Xander pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, his eyes serious. "I have been thinking about what you said a few weeks ago about having nothing to offer, and I need you to understand that you are wrong." Clara blinked, confused, This was not what she had expected. "I do not understand." "You said you have nothing to offer," Xander repeated. "But Clara, your smile is wealth enough. The way you bring light into this house, the way you care for everyone here, the strength you show just by getting up every morning and facing another day, even though life has given you every reason to give up, that is worth more than all the land in Texas." Clara's eyes were burning, and she realized with shock that she was on the verge of tears. "Xander, I know I am just a cowboy," Xander continued, his voice intense. "I do not have much to offer you either. I have some money saved, and maybe someday I will have my own ranch, but right now I am just a hired hand with big dreams. But Clara, I am asking anyway. I am asking if you might consider letting me court you properly, because I have been falling for you since the first moment. I saw you standing outside that saloon, trying so hard to be brave." The tears spilled over then, running down Clara's cheeks as she stared at this man who somehow saw her as something other than a burden or an obligation. "Why?" she whispered. "Why me?" "Because you are clever and strong and kind," Xander said simply. "Because you make the best apple pie I have ever tasted, and because you sing while you work when you think no one is listening, and because when you smile, really smile, it is like the sun coming out from behind clouds. Because I think you are remarkable, Clara Sutherland, and I would be honored if you would give me a chance to prove that I can be worthy of you." Clara pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed by the rush of emotions. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to throw caution aside and embrace the possibility of happiness. But another part, the part that had been hurt and disappointed too many times, held her back. "What if it does not work?" she asked. "What if we try this and it ruins everything?" "I would lose my position, my home." "You would not lose anything," Xander said firmly. "I give you my word, Clara. Whether you say yes or no, your position here is secure. Mr. Patterson does not even have to know I asked unless you want to tell him. This is between you and me, and it will not affect your work or your place at the Double J." "You cannot promise that," Clara protested. "I can and I do," Xander said. "And if you need time to think about it, I understand. I am not asking for an answer right now. I just needed you to know how I feel, because keeping it inside was becoming impossible." Clara lowered her hands and looked at him, really looked at him, this man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect, who had given her a chance when she had nothing, who was now offering her something she had never dared to hope for. "You really think my smile is wealth enough?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I think your smile is worth more than all the silver in those coins," Xander said, gesturing to the money on the table. "And I think if you let me, I would spend every day trying to earn it." The last of Clara's defenses crumbled. "Yes," she said, the word coming out as barely more than a breath. "Yes, Xander, you can court me, but slowly, because I am terrified and I do not know how to do this." The smile that broke across Xander's face was brilliant, transforming his features with pure joy. "Slowly," he agreed. "As slow as you need. Though I should warn you, once the other hands realize what is happening, they are going to give me endless grief about going soft." Clara laughed, a real laugh that felt strange and wonderful after so much fear and uncertainty. "I suspect you can handle it." "I suspect you are right," Xander said. He reached across the table, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. Clara hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his, feeling the calluses and warmth of his skin. They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined, the future suddenly bright with possibility. Their courtship began quietly, with small gestures and stolen moments. Xander would find excuses to linger after meals, helping Clara with tasks and engaging her in conversation about everything and nothing. He brought her wildflowers from the pastures, small bunches of yellow and purple blooms that she arranged in a jar on the kitchen windowsill. She saved him extra helpings of his favorite dishes and learned how he took his coffee, the way he liked his eggs cooked, the stories that made him laugh. Mr. Patterson noticed, of course, because he was far more observant than he let on. But he said nothing, merely watching with what might have been approval as Xander and Clara grew closer. The other ranch hands were less subtle, teasing Xander mercilessly about his sudden interest in being near the house, but it was good-natured ribbing, and Xander took it in stride. January brought cold winds and occasional rain, and the ranch settled into the slower rhythm of winter work. It was during one of these cold evenings, with rain drumming on the roof, that Xander asked Clara to take a walk with him. She bundled into her shawl, and they stood together on the covered porch, watching the rain darken the earth. "Tell me about New Orleans," Xander said. "What was it like growing up there?" Clara leaned against the porch railing, thinking back to a life that seemed impossibly far away now. "It was beautiful and terrible all at once," she said slowly. "Beautiful because of the architecture and the music, and the way the city felt alive at all hours. Terrible because of the poverty and the disease and the way people could be so cruel to each other. My father was a clerk, nothing important, but he was honest and he loved my mother and my brother and me. When he died, everything fell apart. We had no savings, no resources, and my mother took in laundry to try to keep us fed. The fever took her 2 years later." "I am sorry," Xander said quietly. "My brother went to sea, looking for work on the ships," Clara continued. "We got 2 letters and then nothing. I think he probably died, though I will never know for certain. I managed to get work with the family I mentioned, and for a while things were stable. But the husband," she stopped, not sure how much to reveal. "You do not have to tell me if you do not want to," Xander said. "I want to," Clara said, surprised to realize it was true. "He made it clear that he expected certain favors in exchange for my continued employment. When I refused, his wife blamed me for tempting him and dismissed me without references. I used the last of my savings to book passage on a steamboat heading west, and I have been moving from town to town ever since, looking for work and trying to stay ahead of starvation." Xander's jaw was tight, anger flickering in his eyes. "If I ever meet that man, he is not worth your anger," Clara interrupted gently. "He is just one of many men who think women like me are there for their use. What matters is that I survived and I found my way here." "I am glad you did," Xander said. He moved closer and Clara felt his warmth even through her shawl. "I am glad you kept going, kept fighting, because if you had given up, I never would have met you." Clara turned to face him, and in the dim light from the house windows, she could see the sincerity in his expression. "I am glad I met you too," she admitted. "You make me feel like maybe I deserve good things, like maybe my life can be more than just survival." "You deserve everything good," Xander said fiercely. "You deserve happiness and security and someone who sees how incredible you are. And Clara, I want to be that someone. I want to be the man who gives you all the things you deserve." Clara's heart was hammering, and she felt tears prick her eyes again, but they were good tears this time, tears of hope rather than despair. "You already are," she whispered. Xander lifted one hand slowly, telegraphing his intention, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Clara did not want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted the chance to see if this fragile connection between them could become something real and lasting. His hand cupped her cheek, rough and gentle all at once, and then he was leaning in and she was rising up on her toes, and their lips met in a kiss that was soft and sweet and full of promise. It lasted only a moment before they both pulled back, but Clara felt the impact of it all the way through her body, a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature. Xander's eyes were bright, his smile tender. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted. "Only weeks." Clara teased, her own smile feeling natural and unforced. "I would have thought at least days." "Days, weeks, it is all the same when you are waiting for the right moment," Xander said. He pulled her into a gentle embrace, and Clara rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart beneath his shirt. They stood like that for a long time, rain falling around them, and Clara thought that she had never felt safer, never felt more like she had finally found a place to belong. The winter passed in a blur of work and quiet happiness. Xander and Clara continued their courtship, always proper, always mindful of her reputation, but growing closer with each passing day. They talked about their dreams, Xander's hope of one day owning his own ranch, Clara's desire for a home and a family, the simple wish for a life of peace and contentment. They discovered shared loves, books they had both read, a fondness for the quiet hours of early morning, an appreciation for the vast beauty of the Texas landscape. In February, Xander took Clara into Del Rio for supplies, and they walked through the town together, Xander carrying the parcels while Clara selected dry goods from the general store. She saw the way people looked at them, noted the knowing smiles from the shopkeeper and the whispers from other customers. She was known now, not as a desperate woman outside a saloon, but as Clara Sutherland from the Double J Ranch, and the change in her status was almost dizzying. "Does it bother you?" Xander asked as they loaded the supplies into the wagon. "The way people talk?" "No," Clara said honestly. "Let them talk. I know the truth of what we are, and that is all that matters." What they were was a partnership built on mutual respect and growing love. Xander never pressed her for more than she was ready to give, never made demands or expectations beyond her company. And Clara, who had spent so long guarding her heart, found herself slowly opening up, trusting that this man would not hurt her the way so many others had. In March, Mr. Patterson called them both into the main room after supper. Clara's stomach clenched with worry, wondering if the older man had decided that the courtship was inappropriate, that she needed to leave. But when they sat down at the table, Mr. Patterson's expression was contemplative rather than angry. "I have been doing some thinking," he said without preamble. "I am not getting any younger, and the ranch is more work than I can handle on my own anymore. I have been considering taking on a partner, someone who knows the operation and who I can trust to help me run things." Xander straightened in his chair, interest kindling in his eyes. "Sir, I am offering you a partnership, Xander," Mr. Patterson said. 25% ownership of the Double J in exchange for taking on more responsibility and helping me manage the operation. The pay would be better, and you would have a say in how we run things. What do you say?" "I say yes," Xander said immediately, his voice rough with emotion. "Absolutely yes, Mr. Patterson, I would be honored." "Good," Mr. Patterson said with satisfaction. He turned to Clara. "And I am hoping this means you will be staying on permanently, Miss Sutherland." A ranch partnership often leads to other sorts of partnerships, and I would hate to lose the best cook I have had in years. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks as she understood what Mr. Patterson was implying. "I have no plans to leave," she said carefully. "Glad to hear it," Mr. Patterson said. "Now, I believe you two have things to discuss, so I will take myself off to bed and leave you to it." He stood, paused to clap Xander on the shoulder, and then disappeared into his bedroom, leaving Clara and Xander alone in the main room. They stared at each other across the table, the implications of Mr. Patterson's announcement settling between them. Finally, Xander spoke. "He is not exactly subtle, is he?" "No," Clara agreed. a smile tugging at her lips despite her nervousness. But he is not wrong either. "Clara," Xander said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I know we have only been courting for a few months, and I know you might want more time. But I need you to know that I am serious about this, about us. I am serious about wanting a future with you." Clara's heart swelled with emotion, love and fear and hope all tangled together. "I am serious too," she said softly. "But Xander, you deserve someone who can bring something to a marriage, someone with a dowry or land or connections. I have nothing, just myself, and that seems like a poor bargain." "I told you before, your smile is wealth enough," Xander said firmly. "And Clara, you bring so much more than you realize. You bring intelligence and strength and kindness. You bring a sense of home that this place has not had since Mrs. Patterson passed. You bring me happiness, and that is worth more than any dowry." "I do not know how to be a wife," Clara admitted, her deepest fear finally voiced. "I do not know how to run a ranch house or entertain guests or any of the things a partner's wife should know. What if I fail you?" "You could never fail me," Xander said. He stood and came around the table, pulling Clara to her feet and into his arms. "You already know how to do all the important things. You know how to make a house a home, how to care for the people around you, how to work hard and face challenges. The rest we will figure out together. And Clara, I am not asking you to be some perfect ideal of a wife. I am just asking you to be yourself, to share your life with me, to let me love you the way you deserve to be loved." Clara looked up at him, this man who had saved her from destitution and then given her so much more, who saw value in her when she could barely see it in herself. "Are you asking me to marry you?" she whispered. "Yes," Xander said simply. "I am asking you to marry me, Clara Sutherland. I am asking you to be my wife, my partner, my companion for whatever life brings us. I do not have a fancy ring to offer you right now, but I promise I will get you one. I do not have all the answers to how our life will look, but I promise I will do everything in my power to make you happy. So what do you say? Will you take a chance on a cowboy who is completely in love with you?" Clara's eyes were wet with tears, but she was smiling, truly smiling, the kind of smile that came from deep joy. "Yes," she said, the word trembling with emotion. "Yes, Xander, I will marry you. I will take that chance, because I love you too." Xander's answering smile was brilliant, and then he was kissing her, really kissing her, with a passion and intensity that made Clara's knees weak. She clung to him, kissing him back with all the love and hope she had been holding inside, and when they finally broke apart they were both breathless and laughing. "We should tell Mr. Patterson," Clara said, though she made no move to leave Xander's arms. "He already knows," Xander said. "Why do you think he offered me the partnership tonight? He was giving us the push we needed." "Meddling old man," Clara said fondly. "Wise old man," Xander corrected, "and I will be forever grateful to him for it." They decided to marry in April, giving themselves time to make preparations, but not so long that the wait would be unbearable. Clara used some of her saved wages to purchase fabric from the general store in Del Rio, pale blue cotton that she fashioned into a simple but pretty dress. Xander made a trip to San Antonio and returned with a thin gold band that fit Clara's finger perfectly and a matching band for himself. The wedding took place on a Sunday afternoon, with Mr. Patterson and the ranch hands as witnesses. The ceremony was held in the small church in Del Rio, officiated by a circuit preacher who happened to be passing through. Clara stood beside Xander in her blue dress with wildflowers in her hair, and when the preacher asked if she took this man to be her lawfully wedded husband, she said yes with absolute certainty, her voice clear and strong. Xander's vows were equally firm, his eyes never leaving Clara's face as he promised to love and cherish her for all his days. When they were pronounced husband and wife, he kissed her with tender reverence, and Clara felt something inside her finally, fully relax. She was no longer alone. She was no longer running. She had found her home, and it was not a place but a person, this cowboy who had seen value in her when she had nothing to offer but her smile. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful. A dinner at the ranch with extra food and the rare luxury of store-bought whiskey for the men and wine for Clara. There were toasts and laughter and good-natured teasing, and Clara found herself surrounded by people who had become her family in the months since her arrival. Mr. Patterson gave a short speech about how pleased he was to see Xander settled, and how lucky the ranch was to keep Clara in the household. The other ranch hands offered their congratulations with genuine warmth, and Clara realized that she had not only found a husband but a community, people who cared about her well-being and celebrated her happiness. As the evening wound down and the guests dispersed, Clara and Xander retreated to the small cabin that Mr. Patterson had offered them as a wedding gift. It was located about a quarter-mile from the main house, a simple two-room structure that had been used for storage, but which the ranch hands had cleaned and repaired as their gift to the newlyweds. It was not much, but it was theirs, and Clara thought it was perfect. Inside, Xander lit the lamps while Clara looked around the space. Someone, probably Mr. Patterson, had stocked the small kitchen with basic supplies, and there was a bed frame with a new mattress in the bedroom, along with the chest of drawers from Clara's old room and a washstand. Curtains hung at the windows, and there was even a small rug on the floor. It was simple and clean and waiting for them to make it into a home. "What do you think?" Xander asked, coming to stand beside her. "I think it is wonderful," Clara said honestly. She turned to him, reaching up to cup his face with her hands. "I think everything about today has been wonderful. Thank you for marrying me, Xander Jameson." "Thank you for saying yes," Xander replied. He covered her hands with his own, turning his head to kiss her palm. "I promise I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this decision." "I could never regret this," Clara whispered. "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me." They came together then, in the privacy of their new home, and Clara finally let go of the last of her fear and doubt. She trusted Xander completely, trusted him with her body and her heart and her future, and the joy of that trust was overwhelming. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, awkward in moments because neither of them had much experience, but filled with laughter and love, and a profound sense of rightness. In the morning, Clara woke to find Xander already up, standing at the window and looking out over the ranch land that was now partially his. She watched him for a moment, this man who was now her husband, and felt a surge of love so intense it almost hurt. He must have sensed her gaze because he turned, and his smile when he saw her awake was soft and intimate. "Good morning, Mrs. Jameson," he said, coming back to the bed. "Mrs. Jameson," Clara repeated, testing the name. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Xander said, sitting on the edge of the mattress. "How are you feeling?" "Happy," Clara said simply. "Happier than I ever thought I could be." Xander leaned down to kiss her, sweet and lingering. "That is good, because I plan to spend the rest of our lives making you even happier." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Clara continued to manage the main house for Mr. Patterson while also setting up their own small home, creating a space that was uniquely theirs. Xander took on more responsibilities at the ranch, working closely with Mr. Patterson to make decisions about breeding stock and land management and hiring. It was hard work, dawn to dusk and sometimes beyond, but it was satisfying work, building something together. In June, Clara realized her monthly courses had not come, and a visit to the doctor in Del Rio confirmed what she had begun to suspect. She was with child, due to arrive sometime in late January or early February. The news filled her with a complex mix of emotions: joy, certainly, but also fear. She had no mother to guide her through this, no female relatives to offer advice and support. She would be navigating pregnancy and childbirth with only her own wits and whatever help she could find. But when she told Xander that evening, his reaction banished most of her fears. He swept her into his arms, laughing with pure delight, and then immediately became protective, insisting she should not work so hard, that they should hire someone else to help at the main house, that she needed to rest more. Clara laughed at his concern but was also touched by it, by the evidence of how much he cared for her and their unborn child. Mr. Patterson was equally pleased by the news, gruffly announcing that the ranch would benefit from having children around again. He did agree with Xander that Clara should have help, and they hired a young Mexican woman named Rosa to assist with the household work. Rosa was cheerful and competent, and she and Clara quickly developed a friendship, communicating in a mix of English and the Spanish that Clara was gradually learning. The summer passed in a haze of heat and growing, both the land and Clara's belly swelling under the Texas sun. She continued to work, though at a slower pace, and spent her evenings in the cabin with Xander, talking about names for the baby and making plans for the future. They were building a life together, piece by piece, and Clara marveled at how different her circumstances were from just a year ago, when she had been desperate and alone in Del Rio. In August, a drought settled over the region, and the ranch hands worked long hours to ensure the cattle had access to water. Xander was often gone from dawn until well after dark, and Clara worried about him, about the toll the work was taking. But he never complained, and when he came home each night, exhausted and dusty, he always had a smile for her and gentle hands on her growing belly, talking to the baby and telling their child about the ranch that would one day be their inheritance. The drought broke in late September with a series of thunderstorms that turned the land green again and refilled the water sources. Clara stood on the porch of their cabin, watching the rain fall and feeling their baby move inside her, and thought about how much could change in a single year. She had been reborn in this place, transformed from a destitute woman with no hope into a wife, and soon to be mother with a home and a family and a future full of promise. October brought cooler weather and the hard work of preparing for winter. Clara spent her days preserving food, putting up vegetables from the garden that Rosa had helped her plant and sewing baby clothes from soft flannel. Her body was growing cumbersome, and simple tasks became more difficult, but she refused to become an invalid. She was strong and she would see this through. In November, on a day that was bright and cold, Xander came to find Clara in the main house. She was making bread, up to her elbows in flour, and she looked up in surprise when he appeared in the doorway. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately, because he never came to the house during the workday unless something was amiss. "Nothing is wrong," Xander assured her. He crossed to where she stood and took her floury hands in his, not caring about the mess. "I just needed to tell you something, and I did not want to wait until evening." "What is it?" Clara asked, her heart beginning to race. "Mr. Patterson just told me that he wants to draw up papers to make me a full partner, 50-50 ownership," Xander said, his eyes bright with excitement. "He says he is tired and wants to retire from the active management, and he trusts me to run the ranch." "Clara, we are going to own half of the Double J," Clara gasped, the news taking a moment to fully register. 50% ownership meant security beyond anything she had dared to dream, meant their child would grow up with a real inheritance, meant she and Xander would never have to worry about losing their place or their livelihood. "Xander, that is incredible," she breathed. Are you certain? As certain as I can be, Xander said. He wants to have the papers drawn up next month, make it all legal and official. Clara, we are going to have a real future. We are going to be able to give our child everything we never had. Clara threw her arms around him, not caring that she was getting flour all over his shirt. We already have everything we never had, she said fiercely. We have each other and we have love, and that is more valuable than any piece of land. But yes, I am thrilled about the partnership. You have earned it, Xander. You have worked so hard and you deserve this. They stood together in the kitchen, holding each other, and Clara thought that this moment, with flour on her hands and their baby moving between them and news of a secure future, was as perfect as any moment could be. She had traveled so far, suffered so much, and somehow she had ended up here in the arms of a man who loved her, with a life that exceeded her wildest hopes. December brought the coldest weather Clara had experienced since arriving in Texas, with frost on the ground in the mornings and a biting wind that swept across the plains. She was huge now, her belly so large she could barely see her feet, and moving was an effort. Rosa took over most of the work at the main house, while Clara focused on final preparations for the baby. Xander built a cradle from mesquite wood, sanding it smooth and lining it with soft blankets that Clara had made. They set it up in the bedroom of the cabin, and Clara would often stand beside it, imagining what it would be like when it held their child. Christmas came, and the ranch celebrated with a feast and the exchange of small gifts. Xander gave Clara a shawl made of soft wool, warmer than anything she owned, and she gave him a new hat to replace the battered one he had been wearing since before they met. They attended Christmas services in Del Rio, and Clara felt the baby kick throughout the sermon, as if their child was already eager to participate in the world. The new year arrived, 1884, and with it came the final waiting. Clara's back ached constantly, and she was tired all the time, but there was also excitement building, the knowledge that soon they would meet the new life they had created together. She moved through the cabin, checking and rechecking her preparations, making sure she had everything she would need when her time came. It happened on a frigid night in late January, when the stars were brilliant in the clear sky and the air was so cold it hurt to breathe. Clara woke to pain, a tightening across her belly that stole her breath, and she knew immediately that this was the beginning. She reached out to shake Xander awake, and he came alert instantly, taking in her expression in the dim lamplight. "The baby?" he asked, already throwing off the blankets. "The baby," Clara confirmed, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear that was beginning to coil in her stomach. She had heard stories about childbirth, about the dangers and the pain, and now she was facing it herself. Xander was a blur of motion, pulling on his clothes and boots. "I will get Rosa," he said, "and I will send someone for the doctor in Del Rio. Just hold on, Clara. You are going to be fine. Everything is going to be fine." He was trying to reassure himself as much as her, Clara realized, and she managed a smile. "Go," she said. "I will be here." Rosa arrived within 15 minutes, calm and competent, and she helped Clara through the contractions that were coming faster now. Xander returned and hovered in the doorway, clearly wanting to help but not knowing what to do. The doctor arrived as dawn was breaking, a grizzled old man named Dr. Carter, who had delivered half the babies in the county. The hours that followed were the longest and most painful of Clara's life. She had thought she knew what suffering was, but this was different, a primal agony that consumed her entire being. Rosa held her hand and offered encouragement in Spanish and English, and Xander stayed nearby, his face pale and his eyes dark with worry. Dr. Carter examined her periodically and pronounced everything normal, but Clara felt anything but normal as her body worked to bring her child into the world. It was early afternoon when Dr. Carter finally told her to push, and Clara bore down with every ounce of strength she possessed. She pushed and pushed, beyond exhaustion, beyond pain, until finally she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the high, angry cry of a newborn baby. "It is a boy," Dr. Carter announced, holding up a squalling, red-faced infant. "You have a son, Mrs. Jameson." Clara fell back against the pillows, tears streaming down her face as Rosa cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket. Then the infant was in her arms, tiny and perfect in hers, and Clara looked down at her son with overwhelming love. He had dark hair like Xander and a determined set to his little mouth, and his eyes, when they opened, were cloudy blue. "Clara," Xander said, his voice breaking. He had moved to sit on the edge of the bed, and his eyes were wet as he looked at their son. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you so much." "I love you too," Clara whispered. She shifted the baby so Xander could see him better. "Look what we made." Xander touched their son's tiny hand with one finger, and the baby immediately grasped it, his little fist closing with surprising strength. Xander laughed, a sound of pure joy. "He is already strong. What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months, but suddenly Clara knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas," she said, "after my father, Thomas Jameson." "Thomas," Xander repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, son." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Dr. Carter confirmed that both Clara and the baby were healthy, and then departed after giving instructions for care. Rosa prepared food and made sure Clara rested, and Mr. Patterson came by to meet his namesake's son, looking pleased and proud. The other ranch hands stopped by throughout the afternoon and evening, offering congratulations and small gifts for the baby. But the moment Clara treasured most came late that night, when everyone had finally left, and it was just her and Xander and their son in the quiet cabin. Thomas was asleep in the cradle beside the bed, and Xander was lying next to Clara, his arm around her shoulders. "You remember what you told me that first night?" Clara asked softly. "Outside the saloon in Del Rio. I told you that you looked like you were waiting for someone," Xander said. "After that," Clara prompted, "when I said I had nothing to offer, nothing of value," understanding dawned in Xander's eyes. "I said your smile was wealth enough." "You did," Clara confirmed. She turned her head to look at him, and even exhausted and battered from childbirth, she smiled, the real smile that came from deep happiness. "I thought you were being kind, saying pretty words to make me feel better, but you meant it, did not you? You really saw value in me when I could not see it in myself." "I meant every word," Xander said. "And Clara, you have given me so much more than your smile. You have given me a home and a partnership and now a son. You have given me purpose and joy and a reason to build something that will last beyond our lifetimes. If anyone should feel like they have nothing to offer, it is me, because I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." "You are worthy," Clara said firmly. "You saved me, Xander. Not just from poverty or danger, but from hopelessness. You looked at a desperate woman outside a saloon and saw someone worth helping. You gave me a chance when I had nothing, and you loved me when I did not think I was worthy of love. Everything good in my life now exists because you were kind to a stranger." "I did not save you," Xander countered. "You saved yourself, Clara. You had the courage to keep going, to accept help when it was offered, to take a chance on a future that was uncertain. All I did was see what was already there, the strength and beauty and worth that you always possessed. You were never nothing, Clara. You were always everything, and I am the lucky one because you chose to share your life with me." Clara felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were good tears, the tears of someone who had finally found peace after a long struggle. She reached for Xander's hand, lacing their fingers together. "We are both lucky," she said. "We found each other at exactly the right moment when we both needed something the other could give. That is not luck, that is fate." "I believe in fate now," Xander said. "How could I not when it brought you to me?" They lay in silence for a while, listening to their son's soft breathing, and Clara thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. All the hardship and pain and fear had been worth it, because it had led her here, to this cabin on a ranch in Texas, to this man who loved her, to this child who represented their future. She had nothing when she arrived in Del Rio, but she had found everything, not in material wealth but in love and family and belonging. Over the following months, Clara adjusted to life as a mother while continuing to help manage the household. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and alert, and he grew rapidly under his parents' devoted care. Xander was a natural father, patient and gentle, and he would spend hours talking to Thomas about the ranch and the cattle and all the things they would do together when the boy was older. In March, the legal papers were finalized, making Xander a 50% owner of the Double J Ranch. Mr. Patterson officially retired from active management, though he still lived in the main house and offered advice when asked. Xander took over the day-to-day operations, and he proved to be an excellent manager, making smart decisions about breeding and land use that increased the ranch's profitability. Clara's role also evolved. She was not just a housekeeper now, but the wife of a ranch partner, a position that came with social obligations she had never anticipated. She was expected to entertain visitors, to attend social functions in Del Rio, to represent the Double J at community events. It was intimidating at first, but Clara discovered she had a talent for hospitality, and her warmth and genuine interest in people made her popular among the other ranch families in the area. The seasons turned, summer heat giving way to fall coolness and then winter cold. Thomas celebrated his first birthday in January of 1885, a milestone that filled Clara with amazement. How could a year have passed so quickly? She looked at her son, now toddling around the cabin and babbling in his own language, and marveled at how much he had grown. In the spring, Clara discovered she was pregnant again, and this time the news brought pure joy without the fear that had accompanied her first pregnancy. She knew what to expect now, and she felt confident in her ability to handle another child. Xander was thrilled, already talking about how Thomas would need a sibling to play with and help with ranch chores. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Clara was not working quite as hard, or perhaps simply because she knew what was normal and what was not. She continued her routines, caring for Thomas and managing the household, and the months passed peacefully. In December, during a cold snap that brought ice to the water troughs, Clara gave birth to a daughter they named Margaret after Xander's mother. She was smaller than Thomas had been, but equally healthy, with pale wisps of hair and gray eyes that would later turn hazel like her father's. With 2 children, life became busier but also richer. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and Clara often found him standing beside Margaret's cradle, talking to her in his own toddler language. Xander juggled ranch management with fatherhood, and he proved adept at both, building his children toys and teaching Thomas to recognize different animals while also expanding the ranch's operations. In 1886, Mr. Patterson's health began to decline. He was in his mid-70s now, and the years were catching up with him. He spent more time resting, less time moving around the ranch, and by fall he rarely left his room in the main house. Clara made sure he had everything he needed, bringing him meals and sitting with him when he wanted company. He told her stories about building the ranch, about his late wife, about the early days when Texas was still wild and untamed. In November, on a quiet morning when frost covered the ground, Mr. Patterson passed away in his sleep. It was peaceful, the doctor assured them, and given his age it was not unexpected, but Clara grieved nonetheless. He had been more than an employer, more than Xander's partner. He had been a father figure, a mentor, a friend. The funeral was well attended, testament to the respect Mr. Patterson had earned in the community, and Clara stood beside Xander at the graveside, holding his hand as they said goodbye to the man who had helped shape their lives. The reading of the will held one final surprise. Mr. Patterson had left his remaining 50% of the ranch to Xander, making him the sole owner of the Double J. There were provisions for Rosa and the other long-time ranch hands, ensuring they would be cared for, but the bulk of the estate went to Xander with the stipulation that he continue to run the ranch according to the principles Mr. Patterson had established. "He believed in you," Clara told Xander that night as they sat together in the cabin. "He knew you would honor his legacy." "I will do my best," Xander said, his voice thick with emotion. "He took a chance on me just like I took a chance on you, and look at what came from those chances, Clara. We have a family, a ranch, a future. We have built something that will last." "We have," Clara agreed. She looked around their home, now expanded with an additional room to accommodate their growing family. Thomas was asleep in his small bed, Margaret in her cradle, and Clara's hand rested on her belly where a third child was beginning to grow, though she had not yet told Xander. This was her life now, full and rich and more than she had ever imagined possible. She had started with nothing, but she had been wrong to think her smile was the only wealth she possessed. She had always had courage and determination and the capacity to love, and those qualities had proven more valuable than gold. Years passed in a pleasant rhythm. The ranch prospered under Xander's management, and the Jameson family grew. After Margaret came another son, John, and then 2 more daughters, Ellen and Sarah. The cabin expanded to accommodate the growing brood, and eventually they built a larger house to replace it, a spacious structure with bedrooms for all the children, and a large kitchen where Clara could prepare meals for the family and the ranch hands. Thomas grew into a capable young man, learning the ranch business from his father and showing every sign of being ready to take over one day. Margaret was clever and curious, always asking questions about everything. The younger children brought their own personalities and challenges, but Clara loved every moment, even the difficult ones. This was the life she had dreamed of without quite knowing what she was dreaming, a life of purpose and belonging and love. In 1895, on a warm spring evening, Clara and Xander sat together on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the land that was now theirs. The children were inside, the older ones helping the younger ones with bedtime routines, and for a moment it was just the 2 of them, as it had been so many years ago in Del Rio. "Do you ever think about that night?" Clara asked. "When we first met?" "All the time," Xander admitted. He reached for her hand, his fingers still strong despite the years of hard work. "I think about how close I came to not stopping, to just walking past you, and then I think about everything I would have missed if I had made that choice. I think about what you said," Clara told him. "About my smile being wealth enough. I did not believe you then, but I believe you now. Not because I think I am worth so much, but because I understand that the things that matter cannot be measured in dollars or land. They can only be measured in moments like this, in a life built together, in children who carry our love forward into the future." "You are worth everything," Xander said, pulling her close. You always were, Clara. I am just grateful I had the wisdom to see it." They sat together as darkness fell, stars beginning to emerge in the vast Texas sky. And Clara thought about the journey that had brought her from a desperate woman with nothing to offer to a wife and mother and partner in a thriving ranch. She thought about all the moments of fear and doubt, all the times she had wanted to give up, and she was grateful she had kept going, had kept fighting because it had led her to this man, this life, this happiness. Years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow as all lives do. Thomas married a young woman from a neighboring ranch, and they built their own house on Double J land, starting the next generation. Margaret trained to become a teacher and opened a school in Del Rio, serving the children of ranch families throughout the region. The younger children found their own paths, some staying close to home and others venturing further afield, but all of them carrying the values of hard work and integrity that their parents had instilled. Xander's hair turned gray, and lines appeared around his eyes, but he remained active and engaged with the ranch until his final days. Clara aged beside him, her body showing the wear of bearing 5 children and decades of work, but her spirit remained strong. They celebrated their 25th anniversary, then their 30th, surrounded by children and grandchildren who had never known poverty or desperation, who had only known the security and love that Clara and Xander had built for them. In the spring of 1903, Xander fell ill with pneumonia. Despite the best efforts of doctors and Clara's devoted nursing, he did not recover. He died with Clara holding his hand, his children gathered around the bed, and his last words were, "Your smile was always wealth enough." Clara wept then, tears of grief but also gratitude, because she had been given more years with this man than she had ever thought possible, and every one of those years had been a gift. She lived another decade after Xander's death, remaining at the ranch and watching her grandchildren grow. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the night they met in Del Rio, about the life they had built together from nothing but courage and love. She wanted them to understand that wealth was not measured in cattle or land, but in the people you loved and the memories you created. Clara passed away peacefully in her sleep in the summer of 1913, at the age of 62. She was buried beside Xander on a hill overlooking the Double J Ranch, the land they had built together. The funeral was huge, attended by family and friends and people whose lives had been touched by Clara's kindness and generosity over the years. Thomas, now middle-aged and running the ranch with his own children, stood at his mother's grave and thought about everything she had overcome, everything she had achieved. She had arrived in Texas with nothing but the clothes on her back and a determination to survive. She had met a cowboy who saw value where others saw only desperation. And together, they had built something that would endure for generations, a legacy not of wealth but of love. As the sun set over the Texas plains that evening, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the family gathered at the ranch house for a meal in Clara's honor. They told stories and shared memories, and someone mentioned the tale of how Clara and Xander had met, how she had said she had nothing to offer, and he had replied that her smile was wealth enough. It was true, Margaret said, her own hair now streaked with gray. Mother's smile was wealth, because it came from a spirit that refused to be broken, from a heart that chose love even when life had given her every reason to choose bitterness. That kind of smile is the rarest treasure there is. The younger generation asked questions, wanting to know more about the grandmother some of them barely remembered. And so the stories were told again, passed down from one generation to the next, the tale of a woman who had nothing and a cowboy who saw everything, and how their love had transformed not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone who came after them. The Double J Ranch continued to operate, passing from Thomas to his children and then to their children, each generation adding to the legacy that Clara and Xander had begun. The original house, where Clara had first cooked breakfast for Mr. Patterson, was preserved as a testament to the ranch's history, and visitors could still see the kitchen where a desperate woman had proven her worth and begun the journey that would change her life. In Del Rio, a historical marker was eventually placed near the site where the Silver Star Saloon had once stood, commemorating the night in November 1883, when Clara Sutherland and Xander Jameson first met. The inscription told their story simply. Here, a cowboy saw wealth in a smile, and a woman found hope in kindness. Their love built a legacy that endures. The marker became a popular spot for wedding photographs, couples wanting to capture some of the magic of that long-ago meeting. And perhaps some of that magic did linger, a reminder that the greatest wealth is not what we possess, but who we become and who we love along the way. Clara's story became part of the folklore of Del Rio and the surrounding ranching community, told and retold until it took on the quality of legend. But those who had known her insisted it was all true. Every word, from her arrival as a destitute woman to her transformation into the beloved matriarch of one of the most successful ranches in the region. They said she proved that wealth had nothing to do with what you started with, and everything to do with what you built. That true riches were measured in love and family, and the difference you made in the world. As decades passed into the 20th century and Texas changed from wild frontier to modern state, the Double J Ranch adapted but never lost sight of the principles Clara and Xander had established. Treat people with respect. Work hard. Value integrity over profit. Love generously. These were the lessons they had lived by, and they became the foundation of a legacy that would endure long after both of them were gone. On quiet evenings, when the wind blew across the Texas plains and the stars shone bright overhead, it was said you could still feel their presence on the ranch, in the house they had built, and the land they had loved. Clara and Xander, the woman who thought she had nothing and the cowboy who saw her true worth, together forever in the place that had given them both a home and a future. Their story remained a testament to the power of kindness, the value of seeing beyond surface circumstances to the potential within, and the truth that sometimes the greatest wealth is simply the smile of someone you love. In a harsh and unforgiving time, they had chosen compassion and built something beautiful from that choice. And in doing so, they created not just a family or a ranch, but a legacy of love that would inspire generations to come. The Double J Ranch still stands today, still operated by descendants of Clara and Xander Jameson, still a testament to what two people can build when they see value in each other and commit to creating something lasting. Visitors to the ranch can see photographs of Clara and Xander, faded images that show a handsome couple, their eyes reflecting the love and respect they shared. They can walk the land that the couple worked, see the graves on the hill where they rest together, and understand that this is more than just a successful ranching operation. It is a monument to the idea that true wealth has nothing to do with material possessions, and everything to do with the connections we forge and the love we share. And so their story ends not with death but with continuation, with the ongoing life of the ranch and the family they created. Clara Sutherland, who arrived in Del Rio with 3 coins and a desperate hope, found more riches than she could have imagined in the arms of a cowboy who valued her smile. Xander Jameson, who could have walked past a stranger in need, instead found his life's purpose and greatest joy in helping her. Together, They proved that sometimes the best things in life come not from what we have but from what we are willing to give, and that a smile freely offered and genuinely appreciated can indeed be wealth enough to build a lifetime of happiness upon.